No, it's fine. Just got to. Didn't anticipate having to hold a mic. I don't know how I'm going to scroll the iPad. I thought it was being so clever. Okay, my name's Julie B. I'm a writer and photographer. I'm just going to tell you about how I use Twitter. And actually, it just goes against everything that Jackie and Robert have just said. I often meet people who don't know how to use Twitter. They believe all the cliches that it's a mob baying after the blood of Daily Mail journalists, or it's full of celebrities, vacuous tweets. They think it's a waste of time, and don't get me wrong, it can be a fabulous waste of time, but it's much more than that. I can trace most of the work I've had over the last year back to Twitter, and this is how it works for me. So I think Twitter is my office. It's a pretty big office. I'm following over 2,000 people, and I've got 2,600 followers. Don't know why. It's hard to keep track of it all, but it's really useful. I spent 3 years temping and nearly 12 at the BBC, so I've spent plenty of time in a real office. And when I left last year to start my own business, I began working at home, which means I'm working in isolation a lot, and I do sometimes miss the noise around me. So this is my literal comparison to Twitter. There's always someone to chat with, so it's like the person sitting beside you in the office. I always had other producers nearby to brainstorm with, and now I've got writers and photographers to talk to when I want. The BBC Scotland controller sat a few feet away from me, so I was always there to have a chat with. When he was working really hard, but he was accessible. And in my new life, the big wigs are just a tweet away, so they're actually surprisingly accessible. The geeks downstairs were handy for help. And now I can ask all sorts of geeky questions on Twitter. Sometimes I don't even have to ask for help. I mention something, they notice it, they get in touch. I always had the telly team at the end of email or messenger to ask for production information. Now on Twitter, whatever you're trying to find, whether it's legal advice or a hardware shop or a beach, there's always people that have that information for you on Twitter. My friends were just along the corridor, and now, well, some of my real life friends are on Twitter, and I've made a lot of new ones along the way. Then there's the water cooler chat, people who share your interests. You can follow them on Twitter and they can follow you. You'd be hard pushed to find a subject nobody wants to talk about on Twitter, although admittedly X Factor does rather divide the Twitter camp. So all these people are within easy reach. In fact, writing this made me realise that it's better than my old office, because it's much easier now to ignore the people you don't want to speak to. And without Twitter, I'd probably spend all my valuable procrastination time on the phone to my mum or striking up a conversation with a postie. So starting my business meant reinventing myself and exploring new territories, and it won't surprise you to know that I cite Twitter as a really big helping hand there. I had no contacts really in charities, for instance, but I've worked with a few great ones since striking up conversations on Twitter. I even used it to wage a mock fundraising war with Stuart from One Kind a few months ago. We were both looking for Firewalk sponsorship, and this gave us a nice angle to sort of battle it out without us having to ask for money. And I did win, so I was quite happy about that. He was the fundraising manager as well, so I don't think he was very impressed. So I've had a lot of work from Twitter, as I said. I live blogged an event last year after being approached on Twitter. Another Twitterer recommended me as an event photographer a few months ago. The guy running the conference started tweeting me, and it sort of meant we built up a bit of a relationship before the conference, and it meant that the day went even better. There's plenty of potential work sitting out there. Sometimes it's just about looking for tweets, asking for help. I find I often don't have to do that because other people notice them and send them my way, which is great. That's actually happened twice already this week. So my main goal, Robert and Jackie were talking about, not putting everything on Twitter. I really do. I have to say, I don't put my whole life on Twitter. People think I do. They don't get it. My main goal is always to market my business, but I don't just talk work. If you follow me already, you know I spout an awful lot of nonsense on there. So although I use it to share photos that I've taken, and I chat about copywriting, I also tweet pictures of spelling mistakes on signs. I'm a total pedant. I do all sorts of random things, like I'll share tweets about lost dogs or bounce ideas off people. I chat with friends and strangers. I use it to discover and recommend suppliers. In fact, Brian, who's coming up later, he's done some work for me, and Diane, my accountant, I found her through Twitter. I get my breaking news on Twitter. I'll go there before I go to News 24, and I use it to complain about ScotRail, but I think everyone does that. I soak up information of my choosings, whether that's internet trends or social events, networking opportunities. Building relationships on any social media platform is all about engagement, and even the mainstream media has had to adapt to that these days. I was the main point of contact for River City for years when I was at the BBC, and that taught me how to engage with people online. It didn't come from BBC training, it just came from experience. So you don't always know what's going to hit the spot, but you just keep trying, and the main thing is you've got to respect your audience and talk to them. And as Robert said, it is completely public, so I don't bitch on Twitter. I'm always careful to convey a good impression because Twitter really does have a long memory. That all sounds quite contrived, but it's really not. It's just become a natural part of my daily life. And perhaps the amount I get from Twitter is directly proportional to the amount of time I spend there. And there are plenty of other platforms to use, but it's something I'll probably take Twitter's crown in the next year or two. But I just love the challenge of forming sentences from 140 characters. I think most of you here are obviously into social media if you're here to listen, so you're probably already on Twitter. A lot of people get scared of it, as I think Amanda said. Once you start using it, you don't really get it, but you've got to just stick with it. I think the most important thing to remember is it's not an instant win. You know, it's an organic process, and do stick with it because it's worth it.
Thank you. Thank you.